The council chamber stretched across half a kilometer of polished crystal, floating in the void between stars. 7 species sat in their designated places, their forms ranging from the barely physical to the impossibly alien. This was the Galactic Concordat, rulers of 1,000 worlds, masters of 10,000 years of peace and prosperity. Today, they discussed vermin. The humans, Ambassador Velkoth began, his crystalline body refracting light into dancing patterns, have achieved faster than light travel. His tone carried the same weight one might use when reporting a child had learned to walk. Impressive for the child, perhaps, but hardly noteworthy to adults. General Vexthar of the Krathax Empire slammed one of his forearms against the table. The sound echoed like thunder. We have reviewed their military databases. Their tactics are... He paused, searching for the word. Primitive. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. Images of human warships rotated slowly, their hulls thick with gray metal plating. Beside them appeared the sleek vessels of the Concordat, beautiful ships that looked more like art than war machines. They use kinetic weapons, Velkoth said, barely suppressing his amusement. Metal projectiles accelerated by chemical explosions and magnetic force. Their largest vessels carry what they call nuclear missiles, fission weapons, if you can believe it. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Talari representative, a being of pure thought housed in a mechanical shell, spoke in electronic tones. Our shields have rendered such weapons obsolete for 6,000 years. Do they truly expect to fight with rocks and fire? There's more, Vexthar continued, pulling up tactical documents. Their military doctrine emphasizes something they call redundancy. They build multiple systems to do the same job. They stockpile resources far beyond any reasonable need. They maintain what they term supply lines, stretching across vast distances, as if they cannot simply synthesize what they need. Wasteful, another council member observed. Inefficient, agreed a third. Vexithar zoomed in on specific documents. Look at their tactical concepts. Combined arms. Asymmetric warfare. Strategic depth. Total war. He shook his massive head. They write about warfare as if it were some kind of science to be studied, rather than a simple demonstration of superior force. The Velshara had not fought a real war in 4,000 years. When disputes arose, they met in honorable combat, fleet against fleet in open space. The stronger side demonstrated superiority, the weaker surrendered, and terms were negotiated. Clean, efficient, civilized. This was how all advanced species conducted themselves. Violence, when necessary, was ritualized and contained. The idea that one would drag out a conflict, expend resources carelessly, or, the humans seemed particularly fond of this, retreat and regroup, was considered cowardice of the highest order. The question, Velkoth said, his tone becoming serious, is what to do with them. They have spread across 20 star systems in less than a century. They breed rapidly, they consume resources at an alarming rate, and they have made it clear they have no intention of seeking our guidance or protection. Protection they desperately need, Vexithar added. The galaxy is not kind to naive species stumbling about with primitive technology. We have kept the peace for 10 millennia. We maintain order. We enforce the rules that keep civilization civilized. A vote was called. It was unanimous. The humans would be brought into the Concordat's fold, whether they wished it or not, for their own good, of course. Velkoth was designated to deliver the message. He composed it carefully, trying to be diplomatic despite the vast gulf between the Concordat's advancement and humanity's crude stumbling. The message was simple. Surrender 40% of human-controlled space. Accept Concordat governance. Pay tribute in resources and technology. In exchange, humanity would receive protection, guidance, and the opportunity to learn from their betters. They gave humanity 30 days to respond. The response came in 18 hours. Admiral Marcus Chen, commander of the human fleet, appeared on every Concordat channel simultaneously. He was an older man by human standards, with gray hair and dark eyes that seemed to look through the screen, rather than at it. To the Galactic Concordat, he began, his voice carrying no trace of fear or uncertainty. We have received your generous offer. We have considered it carefully. Velkoth leaned forward, pleased. The humans had seen reason quickly. Perhaps they were more intelligent than their primitive technology suggested. Our answer, Chen continued, is no. We will not surrender our worlds. We will not pay tribute. We will not bend our knee to anyone, no matter how old their empire or how advanced their technology. The council chamber fell silent. Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. You gave us 30 days to comply or face your Grand Armada. Here's our counteroffer. Come and take it. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Vexithar began to laugh. It started as a rumble deep in his chest and grew into a booming sound that shook the crystal chamber. Did that primitive just challenge the Grand Armada? He asked, tears of mirth forming in his multiple eyes. The fleet that has never known defeat in 10,000 years? They don't understand what they've done, Velkoth said quietly. They truly believe their crude weapons and backwards tactics can stand against us. Then we will educate them, Vexithar declared. The Grand Armada will assemble. We will demonstrate what real warfare looks like. Perhaps after we crush their pathetic fleet, the survivors will be more reasonable. Orders went out across the Concordat. 300 capital ships, each one a masterpiece of technology and engineering, began moving toward human space. The Grand Armada had not assembled in its full strength for 100 years. There had been no need. This would be over quickly. The Council was certain of it. The Grand Armada emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. 300 warships, each one gleaming and perfect, arranged themselves in the traditional battle formation. A wall of power stretching 1,000 kilometers across, shields glowing with contained energy, weapons charged and ready. Commander Zalthris stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Glory. He was Velshara, like Ambassador Velkoth, but where the ambassador was a diplomat, Zalthris was a warrior. He had commanded fleets for 2 centuries. He had never lost a battle he did not expect to lose today. Scan the system, he ordered. Locate the human fleet. His tactical officer, a young Velshara named Kirvosh, worked at his console for several moments. His confusion was visible in the way his crystalline form dimmed slightly. Commander, I'm not detecting any ships. What? The system appears empty, sir. I'm picking up automated stations around the planets. Mining operations, but no military vessels. Zalthris felt a flutter of unease. Had the humans fled? That seemed unlikely given their defiant message. Perhaps they were hiding behind the planets? Continue scanning. Use active sensors. I want every asteroid, every moon, The first missile struck the Eternal Glory's shields before anyone saw it coming. Then another. And another. And suddenly the entire formation was under attack from hundreds of directions at once. Where are they coming from? Zalthris demanded. Everywhere, Kirvosh shouted. The asteroids, the moons, debris fields, they're launching from concealed positions throughout the system. The missiles weren't sophisticated. They were exactly what the Concordat had expected. Crude metal projectiles with nuclear warheads. The shields should have stopped them easily. Should have. The problem was that there were thousands of them, and they kept coming. Zalthris watched his shield indicators drop. Return fire. Target their launch sites. Energy beams lanced out from the Armada, vaporizing asteroids and turning moon bases into craters of molten rock. It felt good, cathartic. The humans were rats in holes, and the Concordat was flushing them out. Then the real attack began. Human warships appeared without warning, materializing from short-range jumps right in the middle of the Armada's formation. They were ugly things, blocky and graceless, covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. They opened fire at point-blank range. Railguns, simple magnetic accelerators, launched solid metal slugs the size of cars. The projectiles moved at a significant fraction of light speed. When they hit the already weakened shields of Concordat ships, they punched through and kept going, tearing through hulls with brutal efficiency. They're inside our formation, someone screamed. The human ships didn't stay to fight. They fired, then jumped away, only to reappear somewhere else seconds later and fire again. It was chaos. There was no formation, no honor, no proper engagement, just brutal hit-and-run attacks that gave the Concordat no chance to respond properly. Deploy fighters, Zalthris ordered. Establish a defensive perimeter. But as the fighter craft launched, they flew into clouds of smaller missiles, simple, stupid weapons that exploded in bursts of shrapnel. Hundreds of fighters died in the first minute. A massive explosion lit up the display. The supply ship Provisions End had taken a direct hit to its reactor. 20,000 tons of supplies gone in a flash of nuclear fire. They're targeting support vessels, Kirvosh reported. Sir, they're ignoring proper targets and going after logistics ships. Zalthris felt his confidence cracking. This wasn't how warfare worked. You fought the enemy fleet. You destroyed their combat vessels. You demonstrated superiority. You didn't sneak around hitting supply ships like some kind of pirate. More human ships appeared, fired, and vanished. A pattern was emerging. They were concentrating fire on specific vessels, destroying them one at a time before moving to the next target. And they always prioritized the vulnerable support ships and command vessels. The Eternal Glory shook as something hit its shields hard enough to bypass them partially. Zalthris gripped his console. All ships, combat jump. Exit the system immediately, sir? Kirvosh stared at him. We're retreating? We're regrouping, Zalthris snapped, but even he could hear the hollowness in his voice. In 3 hours of combat, the Grand Armada had lost 47 ships. Not one human vessel had been destroyed. They couldn't even target the humans properly. The Earthships used some kind of electronic warfare that created false sensor readings, filled space with decoys, and generally made it impossible to know what was real and what wasn't. The Armada jumped away, leaving the Proxima Centauri system in human hands. On the bridge of the human flagship Democracy's Will, Admiral Chen watched the alien fleet retreat. His tactical officer turned to him, grinning. They fell for everything, sir. The decoys, the false sensor readings, the whole plan. Chen didn't smile. They'll be back. And next time they'll be expecting our tricks. What do we do then? Then we use different tricks, Chen said simply. Send a message to all ships. Pull back to defensive positions. Begin Phase 2 of the war plan. Phase 2, sir? We're going to teach them what happens when you fight an enemy that doesn't follow your rules. Chen turned away from the display showing the fleeing alien ships. We're going to teach them about war. Back in the council chamber, Ambassador Velkoth received the report from Commander Zalthris with disbelief. 47 ships, 47 of the Grand Armada's finest vessels, destroyed or damaged by primitive humans using tactics that no honorable species would employ. They used treachery, Zalthris explained, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. They hid like cowards. They attacked support ships. They refused to engage properly. They won, Velkoth interrupted quietly. The word hung in the air like a curse. Against all logic and reason, they won. General Vexithar was already planning. We need more ships. We need to adapt our tactics. We need to crush them, Velkoth said. Completely and utterly. Assemble 800 ships. We will show the humans and the entire galaxy what happens when primitives dare to defy the Concordate. Orders went out. The largest military mobilization in 4,000 years began. The Concordate would not be humiliated by apes who had barely learned to leave their home world. The war had truly begun. 3 months after the disaster at Proxima Centauri, the Concordate assembled 800 warships at the edge of the Talketti system. This time there would be no mistakes. This time they had studied human tactics, prepared countermeasures, and brought overwhelming force. General Vexithar commanded the fleet personally. He stood in the war room of his flagship, surrounded by tactical displays and senior officers from all 7 Concordate species. They had spent weeks planning this operation. The humans will try their ambush tactics again, he told his officers. We will not fall for them. Active sensors at maximum. Fighter screens deployed ahead of the main fleet. Any suspicious asteroid or debris field will be destroyed before we enter weapons range. The Concordate fleet entered the Tau Ceti system with every precaution in place. Sensors swept constantly. Fighters flew in protective shells around the capital ships. They moved slowly, methodically, taking no chances. They found the human defenses immediately, orbital fortresses around the inner planets. Weapons platforms, minefields marked clearly on sensors. The humans weren't hiding this time. Curious, Vexithar muttered. Why show us where everything is? His tactical officer suggested. Perhaps they realize hiding won't work twice. Perhaps they're trying honorable combat this time. Vexithar wasn't so naive. He ordered probing attacks on the outer defenses. The results were not encouraging. The minefields were deeper and more sophisticated than expected. The weapons platforms had interlocking fields of fire. Taking each position cost ships, but the Concordate had ships to spare. Vexithar pressed the attack. The outer defensive ring fell after 2 weeks of grinding combat. The middle ring took another 3 weeks. Always the humans retreated, pulling back to prepared positions, making the Concordat pay in blood for every meter of space. "They're running," one officer said hopefully. "No," Vexthar replied, studying the tactical map. "They're trading space for time, making us expend resources. This is what their doctrine calls defense in depth, multiple layered positions, always falling back to the next prepared line. Then we should jump past their defenses," another officer suggested. "Go straight for their main worlds, and leave these fortresses behind us?" Vexthar shook his head. "They would cut our supply lines. No, we must take each position. But we have the numbers. We will grind through." The grinding continued for months. The Concordat fleet pushed deeper into the Tau Ceti system, taking position after position. But the casualties mounted, not from glorious fleet battles but from constant attrition. Mines that exploded when sensors detected the right target. Long-range missile barrages from positions that were abandoned by the time return fire arrived. Hit-and-run attacks by small, fast human ships that did damage and disappeared before anyone could respond properly. And always, attacks on the supply lines. Human submarines, stealth ships that could hide their signatures almost perfectly, haunted the supply routes. They never attacked warships directly. They destroyed cargo vessels, tankers, repair ships, the unglamorous vessels that kept a fleet functioning. Vexthar found himself spending more time worrying about logistics than strategy. His beautiful fleet needed ammunition, fuel, replacement parts. The supply chain stretched back through 2 systems now, and it was under constant attack. "We should pull back," one of his officers suggested after a particularly bad week. "Consolidate our position, shorten our supply lines, and admit defeat?" Vexthar roared. "We have nearly reached their main planet. One more push and the tactical display lit up with warnings. Human ships, dozens of them, had appeared throughout the system. Not just small raiders this time, full battle groups with capital ships. They weren't attacking the main Concordat fleet. They were attacking the supply bases, the rear positions, the lightly defended areas that had already been conquered. "How?" someone gasped. "How did they get past our sensors?" The answer became clear over the next hours. The humans had hidden ships throughout the system from the beginning. Powered down, cold waiting. While the Concordat fleet had ground its way inward, the humans had let them pass by hidden positions, and now those positions activated, cutting the Concordat fleet off from its supply lines. Vexthar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. His fleet was deep in enemy territory, low on supplies with its supply lines cut and under attack. The human main fleet, fresh and fully supplied, was converging on his position. This had all been a trap. The entire system was a trap. The humans had sacrificed outer positions, had let the Concordat advance, had deliberately lured them in deep, and Vexthar had walked right into it. "All ships," he ordered, his voice heavy. "Prepare for combat jump. We're pulling out." The Concordat fleet retreated from Tau Ceti, leaving behind 400 ships. Some were destroyed in the fighting. Some ran out of fuel trying to reach safety. Some were captured by human forces. It was a disaster that made Proxima Centauri look like a minor setback. Admiral Chen stood on his flagship, watching the broken Concordat fleet limp away. Around him, his officers celebrated. He did not join them. "Send relief to Tau Ceti," he ordered. "Begin repairs on our defenses, and prepare the fleet for offensive operations." "Offensive, sir?" His second-in-command looked surprised. "We just won. Shouldn't we reinforce and consolidate?" "No," Chen said. "We hurt them, but they still have more ships than we do. If we give them time to recover, to learn, they'll come back smarter and stronger. We need to keep them off balance. We need to take the war to them." "Sir, we'll be invading their space." Chen turned to face his officer. "They came to our home and demanded we surrender. They tried to take our worlds by force. Now we're going to show them what happens when you start a war with humanity. We're going to show them that we don't just defend, we destroy." In the council chamber, Velkoth read the casualty reports with trembling hands. 400 ships, thousands dead, entire support fleets destroyed, and the humans had barely lost 100 vessels in return. "How are they doing this?" he whispered. "How are primitives defeating us?" Ambassador Tarvex of the Mindweavers spoke carefully. He was one of the few council members who had begun to understand. "Because they are not primitives, Velkoth. We called their technology primitive. We called their tactics primitive. But we were looking at the tools, not the thinking behind them. What do you mean? Humans don't fight to win battles, Tarvex explained. They fight to win wars. They are willing to lose, to retreat, to sacrifice as long as it brings them closer to final victory. We have fought ritualized conflicts for so long we forgot what real war looks like. They never forgot. They never had the luxury of forgetting. Velkoth's crystalline form flickered with distress. Then what do? We adapt, Vexthar said, entering the chamber. The general looked aged, worn down by months of grinding combat. We learn or we die. It's that simple. But adapting wouldn't be simple. The Concordat had 10,000 years of military tradition to overcome. The humans had 10,000 years of war to draw upon, and humanity was just getting started. The war entered its 6th month. The Grand Armada, once a symbol of invincible might, was a shadow of its former self. Half its ships were destroyed or damaged. The other half were scattered, demoralized, and increasingly desperate. The Concordat had expected a quick victory. They had prepared for a demonstration of force followed by negotiation. They had not prepared for total war. Human fleets struck deep into Concordat space, not with massive armadas seeking glorious battle, but with fast carrier groups that hit multiple targets simultaneously. A fuel depot here, a construction yard there, a communications hub, a supply route. Always moving, never holding territory, just destroying and moving on. The Velshara world of Crystalis Prime watched in horror as human bombers destroyed every orbital facility around their planet. The bombers didn't target the planet itself. That would have been a war crime even by human standards. But they destroyed every shipyard, every defense station, every supply depot. Then they left, jumping away before the defense fleet could respond. Crystalis Prime was unharmed but completely cut off from the rest of the Concordat. No trade, no communication, nothing. This happened to a dozen worlds in 3 months. The humans called it logistics warfare. The Concordat called it barbaric. But barbaric or not, it was effective. Ambassador Velkoth stood before the council, trying to explain how badly the situation had deteriorated. They fight without honor, he said, his voice strained. They target civilian infrastructure. They refuse proper engagement. They coordinate their attacks across a dozen fronts simultaneously. How do we fight an enemy that won't stand and face us? Perhaps, Ambassador Tarvex said quietly. We should ask ourselves why we expect them to. Silence fell over the chamber. For 10,000 years, Tarvex continued, we have fought wars according to established rules. Rules that minimize casualties. Rules that keep conflicts contained. We assumed these rules were universal, that any intelligent species would follow them. But humans, he paused, humans developed their military doctrine fighting each other. They spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing other humans. They had world wars. They had genocides. They developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet. And through all of that, they learned one simple lesson. When survival is at stake, there are no rules. So what do you suggest? Vexthar demanded. That we abandon honor? That we become as barbaric as they are? I suggest we recognize that honor is a luxury of species who have forgotten what desperation feels like. The humans are desperate. We threatened their freedom, their worlds, their very existence. And a desperate human is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. On the human flagship, Admiral Chen was planning the next phase of the offensive. His staff had identified 17 critical targets in Concordat space. Industrial worlds, major fleet bases, command centers. We hit them all simultaneously, Chen explained, pointing at the star map. Carrier groups here, and here. Submarine packs to cut supply lines. Special forces to take out communication hubs. We coordinate everything to begin at exactly the same moment. Sir, one of his officers said hesitantly, That's not a military operation. That's dismantling an entire civilization's ability to make war. Yes, Chen said simply. It is, but sir, that's total war, Chen interrupted. I know what it is, Commander. I know what we're doing. The Concordat came to our worlds and demanded surrender. They tried to take everything from us. Now we're making sure they can never threaten us again. We're not conquering them. We're making it impossible for them to wage war on anyone. The officer looked uncomfortable but nodded. The orders went out. Humanity's full military strength, built up over a century of expansion into space, mobilized for a coordinated strike that would span a dozen star systems. The operation lasted 72 hours. When it was over, the Concordate's ability to produce warships had been reduced by 60%. Their communication network was in shambles. 7 fleet bases were destroyed or damaged beyond repair, and 3 member species of the Concordate sued for separate peace. Withdrawing from the alliance entirely, the Concordate was collapsing. In the council chamber, Velkoth faced a terrible reality. They had lost. Not just battles, not just ships. They had lost the war. Continuing to fight would only bring more destruction. Pride demanded they keep fighting. Survival demanded they surrender. He chose survival. The message went out on all channels, broadcast to every human ship and station. The Galactic Concordate requested terms of surrender. Admiral Chen received the message and felt no triumph. Only grim satisfaction. He had not wanted this war. Nobody who truly understood what war meant ever wanted it. But when war came, you fought to win. You fought to make sure your enemy could never threaten you again. He composed a reply. The Concordate will send representatives to the human colony of New Terra. We will discuss terms. But understand this. We will not negotiate from a position of equality. You started this war. We will dictate how it ends. The message was cold, brutal, entirely unlike the diplomatic niceties the Concordate was used to, but it was honest. And after months of human primitive tactics crushing their advanced fleets, the Concordate had learned to respect human honesty. Commander Zal Thriss, who had survived the opening battles, was given command of the small fleet that would escort the Concordate delegation to New Terra. As his ships approached the human colony, he saw what he had missed before. Human ships were damaged. They bore scars from dozens of battles, but they were all still flying. They had taken losses, yes, but they had not broken. And around the human colony orbited construction yards that were churning out new warships at a rate that made his head spin. The humans had mobilized their entire civilization for war. Every factory, every resource, every citizen was bent toward a single purpose: victory. The Concordate had sent their military to fight. Humanity had sent their entire species. That was the difference. That was what they had failed to understand. And understanding it too late had cost them everything. The delegation landed on New Terra. Ambassador Velkoth, General Vexthar, and representatives from the remaining Concordate species were escorted to a conference room. It was plain, functional, nothing like the grand crystal chambers they were used to. That alone spoke volumes about human priorities. Admiral Chen entered the room. He looked tired. The war had aged him, but his eyes were still hard, still sharp. "Let's begin," he said simply. The conference room on New Terra was nothing special. Plain walls, a simple table, chairs designed for various body types. No grand architecture, no artistic flourishes. The humans had not built this room to impress. They had built it to work. Ambassador Velkoth sat across from Admiral Chen and felt the weight of history pressing down on him. 10,000 years of Concordate dominance ending in this simple room. He wanted to feel angry. Instead, he just felt tired. "The terms," Chen began without preamble, activating a holographic display, "are non-negotiable. But before we discuss them, I want to make something clear. We did not want this war. We wanted to be left alone to grow and develop at our own pace. You forced this conflict, remember that." Vexthar bristled but said nothing. What could he say? Every word was true. Chen continued. "First, the Concordate will immediately withdraw all forces from the 43 star systems humans have claimed. These systems are now and will remain human territory. Any Concordate vessel entering human space without permission will be considered hostile and destroyed." Velkoth started to protest. 43 systems was far more than the 20 humanity had, controlled before the war, but stopped himself. Arguing would be pointless. Humanity had taken those systems by force. They would keep them the same way. Second, the Concordate will pay reparations for the costs of this war. We will provide a list of required materials and technology. You have 10 years to deliver. 10 years? Velkoth's crystalline form flickered with distress. That will cripple our economy. Your Armada killed 14,000 human civilians in the attack on the Tau Ceti orbital habitats, Chen said, his voice flat and cold. You tried to starve out 3 colonies by destroying their agricultural satellites. You wanted total surrender? Be grateful we're only asking for reparations. The room fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable, The Concordat had been willing to inflict far worse terms on humanity. Having those same terms reflected back at them felt wrong, but they could hardly claim injustice. Third, Chen continued, humanity will hold a permanent seat on the Concordat Council with full voting rights, not as junior members, as equals. This drew objections from several council members. The idea of primitive humans, no, they couldn't call them primitive anymore, could they? Sitting as equals on the council that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was hard to accept. You have proven your strength, Velkoth said carefully. But the council makes decisions about trade, about law, about civilization itself. Do humans have the experience necessary to what? Chen interrupted. To make good decisions? We've been making decisions about civilization for 10,000 years, Ambassador. We just did it on one planet instead of 1,000, and in that time we created democracy, art, science, and yes, terrible weapons. We learned from all of it. You want to know if we're ready? We're ready. The truth was the Concordat needed humanity now. 3 species had already withdrawn from the alliance. 2 more were considering it. The Concordat was fracturing. Having humanity inside the organization, bound by its laws and treaties, was better than having them outside as an unpredictable threat. Fourth, Chen said, the Concordat will agree to a mutual defense pact. If any member of the Concordat is attacked, humanity will defend them. And if humanity is attacked, the Concordat will defend us. Why would you want to defend us? Vexthar asked, genuinely confused. After everything we've done? Chen was quiet for a moment. Because war should not be the first answer. Because peace is better than conflict. Because we would rather have you as allies than enemies. We proved we can win wars. Now we want to prove we can win peace. It was unexpectedly philosophical from a man who had just spent a year destroying fleets. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps understanding war made you appreciate peace more. And finally, Chen said, his voice becoming hard again, the Concordat's military doctrine will be reviewed and updated by a joint committee. Half human, half Concordat representatives. Your current tactical thinking nearly got you exterminated. If you want to survive in a galaxy where other species might not be as merciful as us, you need to learn how to actually fight. You want to teach us warfare? Velkoth asked. No, Chen corrected. We want to teach you how to win, how to adapt, how to think strategically instead of tactically. Your species have been playing at war for so long you forgot what it really means. Consider this our final lesson. Never assume your enemy will fight the way you expect them to. Never assume technology alone wins wars, and never ever underestimate someone fighting for their survival. The terms were formally signed 3 days later. The war was over. The Concordat would survive, but it would never be the same. The galaxy had a new power, and that power had introduced concepts the other species were only beginning to understand. Months after the treaty was signed, Velkoth found himself in the new council chamber. It had been rebuilt to accommodate human delegates. Admiral Chen sat beside him now, no longer as an enemy but as a fellow council member. I have a question, Velkoth said during a break in proceedings. Your tactics, your strategies, they seem brutal to us. But you call them normal. Why? Chen considered the question. Because we had to learn them to survive ourselves. Humans spent most of our history fighting other humans. We had empires rise and fall. We had wars that killed millions. We developed weapons that could end our entire species. And through all of that violence, all that death, we learned how to wage war effectively. Not honorably. Not beautifully effectively. But at what cost? Velkoth asked. What does it do to a species to become so good at destruction? It teaches us the value of peace, Chen replied. Every human learns history. We learn about the world wars, about nuclear weapons, about all the times we nearly destroyed ourselves. We remember. And remembering makes us very, very careful about starting wars. But when someone else starts one, he trailed off. You finish it, Velkoth concluded. We finish it, Chen agreed. A year after the war ended, the Concordat faced its first external threat since the human conflict. A hostile species from outside known space began raiding border worlds. The old Concordat would have assembled a grand fleet, met the enemy in open battle, and either won gloriously or lost honorably. Instead, Admiral Chen suggested a different approach. Small, fast response groups, hit-and-run tactics, targeting supply lines and command structures, making the raiders realize that every attack would cost them more than they could gain. It worked. The raiders withdrew after 3 months, having lost the will to fight an enemy that refused to fight properly. The galaxy was learning. War was not a game, it was not ritual, it was survival. And humanity, the species that had called themselves primitive, had proven they understood survival better than any species in the galaxy. Commander Zal Thriss, now an advisor to the Concordat military, watched human instructors teaching young officers. They taught principles: adaptability, ruthlessness when necessary, the importance of logistics, the value of unpredictability. They taught that technology was a tool, not a solution. They taught that winning mattered more than looking good while doing it. He approached one of the human instructors afterward, a young officer who had fought in the Tau Ceti campaign. "Do you think we can learn?" Zal Thriss asked. "Can a species like mine, raised on honor and ritual, truly learn to fight like humans?" The instructor considered the question. "You can learn to adapt," she said. "You can learn to think strategically. You can learn to use whatever tools work best. But to fight like humans," she shook her head, "that requires 10,000 years of fighting each other. That requires knowing what extinction feels like and deciding to survive anyway. I hope you never have to learn that. I hope no species does, but if we must, then remember what we taught you. There's no honor in defeat. There's no beauty in losing. There's only survival. And survival is worth any cost, any sacrifice, any tactic that works. The galaxy called our methods primitive, but primitive just means they'd never seen them before. Now they have. And now they know. Never underestimate the species that learned warfare in the hell of its own making." Years passed. The Concordat rebuilt. Human technology and Concordat technology merged, creating something new. Trade flourished. Peace held, enforced now by a military that had learned the harsh lessons humanity taught. In the council chamber, where 7 species once ruled with arrogant certainty, 8 species now deliberated as equals. The humans who had been dismissed as primitive now helped guide galactic civilization. Their warships, scarred from countless battles, patrolled trade routes alongside former enemies. The galaxy had learned its lesson: never mistake different for inferior, never assume old means better, and never ever start a war with a species that fights to win. Admiral Chen retired eventually, his duty done. But the legacy of that war lived on. The galaxy was harder now, more pragmatic, less certain of its own superiority. Perhaps that was healthy. Perhaps arrogance needed to be humbled occasionally, and somewhere on 1,000 human worlds, children learned about the war. They learned about the Grand Armada that came with overwhelming force. They learned about the battles fought and won. But most importantly, they learned the lesson humanity had always known. Peace is precious because war is terrible. And if you must fight, fight to win. Fight to survive. Fight so that you never have to fight again. The galaxy called human tactics primitive. Then humanity crushed the Grand Armada and taught the galaxy what primitive really meant: doing whatever it takes to protect your own. In the end, that wasn't primitive at all. It was the most advanced philosophy in the universe: survival.